There's a number that most engineers find genuinely surprising when they encounter it first. The L1 cache in a high-end processor costs roughly 1,000 times more per bit than the NAND flash in an SSD sitting next to it. Same silicon wafer, same fab, different physics. Now, the memory hierarchy isn't a design choice that clever engineers could optimize away. It's a direct consequence of physics, and the physics doesn't negotiate. Fast memory requires cell structures that take up a lot of area. Dense memory requires cell structures that are slow to access. There is no technology that is simultaneously fast, dense, cheap, and non volatile. And every level of the hierarchy exists because nothing above or below it can do its job at an acceptable cost. Now, the figure on the screen plots access latency against cost per bit on a logarithmic axis for every major memory technology. Read it from the upper left to the lower right. SRAM at the top left, fastest access, highest cost per bit. NAND Flash at the lower right, slowest access, lowest cost. DRAM in the middle. HDD at the extreme lower right, slower than Flash but cheaper still. What the arrow is showing you is the fundamental constraint. As you move toward lower cost per bit, latency increases. This is not a trade-off that can be engineered around. It reflects the physical reality that smaller, cheaper storage cells are inherently harder to access quickly. Your phone has all these simultaneously because each level is doing a job the others can't. The processor's SRAM cache absorbs the latency mismatch between the CPU and the DRAM. The DRAM holds the working set of active applications. The NAND flash stores everything else persistently, cheaply, and non volatilely. Take any one of those levels out, and the system either becomes impossibly expensive or impossible slow. So, the reason your processor has an L1 cache, an L2 cache, and an L3 cache, rather than just one large fast memory, comes down to a single number. A modern SRAM cell occupies roughly 120 to 150 square microns per bit in advanced nodes, while a DRAM cell occupies 6 to 8. That's a 20 to 1 area difference, and area on a silicon die is money. The SRAM stores a bit in 6 transistors, forming a cross-coupled latch. The latch regenerates its own state continuously as long as power is applied. No leakage, no refresh, no timing constraint on how long the data can sit there. Because the state is held in active logic rather than passive charge, reading it takes under 1 nanosecond. The access time is limited by wire propagation and transistor switching speed, not by charge sensing. Now, DRAM stores the same bit in one transistor and one capacitor, one device instead of 6, which is why the area per bit is 10 to 20 times smaller. But the capacitor leaks. Charge stored on a 10 femtofarad capacitor drains away through the access transistor's subthreshold current in milliseconds. Without periodic refresh, a controller circuit that reads every row and rewrites it before the charge decays to an ambiguous level, DRAM forgets everything. The refresh cycle runs every 64 milliseconds and consumes real power even when nothing else is happening. Now, the read latency for DRAM is 40 to 80 nanoseconds, 50 to 100 times slower than the SRAM. And the latency mismatch between DRAM and the processor pipeline is precisely the gap the SRAM cache hierarchy is designed to bridge. Now look at the NAND flash row. Read latency is 50 to 100 microseconds. That's 1,000 times slower than the DRAM. Different technology entirely, and that's what the next two slides are about. Now, NOR flash is not what most engineers mean when they say flash memory. When someone says the SSD in their laptop has flash, they mean NAND. NOR Flash is a different architecture built around a different access model. And to understand why it exists, you have to understand what problem it was designed to solve. A microcontroller executing firmware needs to be able to fetch any instruction at any address, in any order at high speed. It needs what engineers called execute in place capability. The processor can run code directly from the flash array without first copying it into a separate RAM. That requires random byte addressable reads at speeds close to what the processor expects. The figure shows how a NOR flash achieves this. Each cell has its own connection between the drain terminal and the bit line. Reading any cell means asserting the appropriate word line voltage and sensing the current on that cell's dedicated bit line, exactly analogous to reading an SRAM or a DRAM bit. There is no dependency on neighboring cells. No need to read a page before accessing a byte. Random read latency for NOR flash is 60 to 100 nanoseconds, slow compared to the SRAM but fast enough for direct code execution. The downside is visible in the diagram. Every cell takes its own area for the bitline contact and source connection. That area overhead limits the density NOR can achieve. In practice, NOR flash capacity tops out at a few gigabytes. That's fine for firmware, which is typically a few megabytes at most. It's completely insufficient for storing photos, music, or operating system files. The NOR flash market is mature and stable. The physics is well understood. The designs have converged, and the major suppliers serve it with incremental improvements rather than fundamental challenges or changes. It shows up in embedded systems, automotive controllers, and network equipment. Anywhere where fast random code access matters more than raw storage density. The NAND string, on the other hand, is one of the most consequential architectural decisions in the history of semiconductor memory. The idea introduced by Masuoka San at Toshiba in 1987 was simple. Instead of giving each flash cell its own independent connection to the source line, chain the cells together in series. One bit line at the top of the chain, one source connection at the bottom, and 32 to 128 cells in between. Now look at the NOR versus NAND diagram. In the NOR structure, every cell has a direct connection to the common source. You can see the crimson dotted lines running from each cell down to its source. Each of those connections consume die area. In the NAND string on the right, there is no such individual connection. The cells are stacked vertically with shared nodes between them. The only connections to the outside are one bit at the top and one common source at the bottom. Removing those individual source contacts drops the cell area to as low as 4f squared, where f is the minimum lithographic feature size. NOR flash with its individual contacts can't get below roughly 10f squared. That factor of 2.5 in cell area becomes a factor of 10 to 20 in practical bit density when you account for peripheral circuitry, spacing rules, and array efficiency. But the series topology comes at a cost. To read any one cell in the string, every other cell must be biased into its fully on state so that it doesn't impede the current through the string. You can't read a single cell in isolation. You have to read an entire page, typically 4 to 16 kilobytes, in a single operation. You can't erase a single page, you have to erase an entire block, typically 256 kilobytes to 4 megabytes. So those page level reads and block level erases aren't incidental details. They are the central constraint that drives every architectural challenge in NAND storage, where leveling, garbage collection, write amplification, read disturb. Everything in ARC-C from C2 onward is downstream of this one topology choice. Now, for roughly 20 years, NAND flash scaled the same way as every other CMOS technology scaled. Shrink the feature size, fit more cells per unit area, reduce cost per bit. From 180 nanometers in the early 2000s down to 90, then 43, then 20, then approaching 15 nanometers. The left panel shows that scaling trajectory, regular, predictable, following a density roadmap that the industry could plan around. But look at where it stops, around 2015 at roughly 15 nanometers. That's not where the industry ran out of ideas, that's where the physics stopped cooperating. At the sub 15 nanometer pitch, floating gate cells on adjacent word lines are so physically close that the charge stored on one floating gate introduces a measurable threshold voltage shift in its neighbors through direct capacitive coupling. The shift can exceed 200 millivolts, large enough to blur the distinction between programmed and erased states, which means data errors. The closer you pack cells to increase density, the worse the interference became. Shrinking further would have required either larger sensing margins or more error correction overhead, both of which erode the density and cost advantages that motivated the shrink. The answer was to stop shrinking laterally and start growing vertically. 3D NAND, introduced commercially around 2015, form cells around vertical channel cylinders punched through alternating oxide and nitride layers deposited on the wafer. The cell to cell interference problem largely disappears because vertically adjacent cells are separated by dielectric rather than sitting at the same depth, separated only by a few nanometers of air gap. The density scaling driver shifted from lithography to deposition. Adding more layers costs roughly the same as the additional deposition and etch steps required. There's no fundamental physics barrier to adding layers, only process complexity. Current production has passed 200 layers. Some manufacturers are targeting 300 layers within the next 2 years. At 200 layers with TLC storage, that is 3 bits per cell, a single die the size of a thumbnail stores roughly 1 terabit. The numbers here are not subtle. In 2024, global NAND Flash shipments exceeded 400 exabytes of new storage capacity. NOR Flash shipped less than 1 exabyte. Every video in this arc is addressing a real active engineering problem. NOR Flash was a solved problem before most working engineers entered the industry. The physics is understood. The designs are stable and the market is served by incremental optimization. NAND Flash is a technology where every new generation introduces new reliability challenges that require deeper physical understanding to access. Stacking 200 layers makes cells physically different from their planar predecessors. The charge trap cell, a variant of the floating gate that stores charge in discrete traps in a nitride layer rather than on a conductive polysilicon node, has largely replaced the floating gate in 3D NAND because it's easier to manufacture in a vertical stack. The reliability physics of charge trap cells is meaningfully different from floating gate physics, and we'll cover both. Multi-level cell operation, that is storing 3 or 4 bits per cell by creating finer threshold voltage distributions, creates sensing margins tight enough that a single program erase cycle can produce enough oxide damage to push a cell out of spec. The error correction demands on modern TLC and QLC NAND require codes sophisticated enough that the ECC engine is a significant fraction of the controller die area. None of those problems exist in NOR Flash. All of them exist in NAND. And that is why ARC-C is in NAND arc. Every video from C1 onwards builds one layer of the physical understanding needed to reason about these problems from first principles. The cell model, the array architecture, the multi-level cell constraints, the reliability mechanisms, and the system-level compensation techniques that keep modern NAND storage reliable despite physics that seems to work against it.